I'm here with Yuka Roya from the business desk. Yuka, welcome to the programme. We've been talking about the elections in India all day. Narendra Modi poised for a third term as Prime Minister. But unlikely to govern in a majority, is he? His party, the BJP, going to have to enter some sort of a coalition because the electorate seem aggrieved about certain aspects of the economy. What's this about?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Narendra Modi, first of all, has claimed victory and called this election outcome a historic feat in the face of a surprisingly weak showing for his party. The results seem to confirm that despite India's stellar economic growth of recent years, many voters were frustrated that it's not trickling down to the masses fast enough. Vedika Bahel takes a closer look.
It's one of the world's fastest growing economies, but economic challenges remained a key sticking point for many voters in India's election. The country's economy grew by 8.2% for the fiscal year ending in March, surpassing the UK to become the fifth largest economy, with projections to overtake Germany and Japan to claim third place by 2027. But with the world's largest global population, a vast proportion of which lives under the poverty line, these figures don't necessarily illustrate the true growth.
We have to think about the population size of over 1.4 billion people, and hence we have to be thinking about GDP per capita. So it needs more than what it is currently having.
When first elected a decade ago, Narendra Modi pledged to create more jobs. The Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy estimates unemployment at 8.1%, with Modi's administration failing to generate enough jobs for its expanding population. Although it's difficult to measure unemployment given India's large informal labour force, the joblessness was an issue that saw frustrated voters turn out to the polls.
They should have delivered on these promises as the population is continuously increasing, but the employment has decreased.
Many also argue an inequality gap confuses the true momentum of Indian economic activity. The rich 1% of Indians hold over 40% of the country's wealth. And according to a study by the World Inequality Lab, India's present billionaire Raj era has exacerbated income equality, with the gap between rich and poor even wider than it was under British rule.
OK, so you could just tell us how investors in India are reacting to all of this.
Well, Indian shares pulled back strongly, plunged across the board in one of their worst sessions in more than 4 years, following the announcement. The main indices Nifty 50 and BSE Sensex both closed down almost 6% after a strong rally over the past few days, as exit polls then predicted a landmark win for the BJP. So today, the pullback was equally sharp. The Adani conglomerate saw all of the group's listed companies tumble on the stock market, including a 25% drop for Adani Enterprises, that's the holding company. In total, the rout wiped out almost $45 billion in the group's market value, Tom.
OK, the Nifty 50, definitely my favourite stock exchange name there. Now, Europe gearing up for parliamentary elections. Farmers trying to make their voices heard, aren't they?
Well, farmers' revolt over economic hardship has been a common sight in the EU, and some hardliners were back in Brussels this Tuesday, just ahead of the elections. Hundreds of tractors convened near the EU headquarters demanding change in Europe's agricultural and environmental regulation, as well as the scrapping of some free trade agreements. Earlier this year, massive protests led to governments and Brussels to make concessions. This time, though, the movement was shunned by mainstream farming unions as politically motivated. The protest was led by a Dutch lobby group, with links to far-right political groups. Let's hear what some of them had to say.
We want to produce our crops like free people, not like prisoners.
Everything we can do is fight for our future, for the future of farming in Europe, for the future of farm supply, also for the European citizens, because it's important for all of us.
OK. Now, some other news. South Korea's president has committed to expanding development aid and boosting trade with the African continent.
Well, President Yoon Suk-yeol is hosting representatives from some 48 African nations at a summit in Seoul. Trade with the continent accounts for less than 2% of South Korea's exports and imports, but it's home to vast amounts of minerals that are critical for the high-tech and auto industries. Leo McWin takes a closer look at day one of the two-day summit.
A symbolic handshake representing a boost in trade ties between South Korea and many African nations. That was the outcome of the first day of a summit headed by President Yoon Suk-yeol.
In order to boost cooperation with Africa, South Korea will expand official development assistance to around $10 billion until 2030. Also, in order to encourage South Korean trade and investment in the region, South Korea will provide $14 billion in export financing.
Representatives from 48 African nations, including 33 heads of state, are attending the two-day summit, with talks focusing on trade and investment. Trade with African nations currently accounts for less than 2% of South Korea's total imports and exports. Bilateral exchanges between Seoul and the continent totaled just over $23 billion in 2022, a tiny figure compared to China, who has spent years expanding in Africa, totaling $256 billion over the same time frame. Both sides also agreed to launch talks on critical minerals to secure stable supplies. Africa has large reserves that are essential for Korean technology companies. The continent is home to 30% of the world's chrome, cobalt and manganese, amongst others, which could be vital in the production of Samsung smartphones or Hyundai cars. On Wednesday, South Korean business leaders will host a summit focused on investment, industrial development and food security.
France 24's Leo McWing reporting there, and that's it for business.
Thank you very much indeed.